Welcome to The Reins of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you lead with presence and influence with trust. I'm your host, Marinda Smith, business leadership strategist, sharing actionable insights on mindset, EQ and energy uniquely illuminated by wisdom gained alongside my equine partners. Hello and welcome back to The Reins of Leadership. Today I really wanted to explore what it means to lead from within, from wisdom, and sometimes from the middle of the paddock, because life's messy and sometimes, it's not all as it goes as well as it's meant to. So today's episode is personal. It's maybe a bit tender for me. And it's one of those moments that caught me off guard, even though deep down I knew. So last weekend, I took my pony King to a riding lesson, and he's a beautiful boy who's really in tune with me. He's very sensitive to energy around him and to me. And like many of us, though, he can be a bit avoidant from time to time. And so I'm learning to understand why he throws up that avoidance. So I hopped on and straight away I started feeling something was off. And King wasn't listening in the way that he usually is. He wasn't with me. He was avoiding contact, disconnecting from what I was asking him to do. And so under discussion with my instructor, I did what I thought was the right thing in the moment, and I got off and I handed the reins to my instructor. As I watched them move together, something curious caught my eye, and it was King's tail. It wasn't where it usually sits. It was sticking more straight, not that lovely curved arch that you become used to seeing in a pony's tail. And it wasn't swishing freely, it was more jagged in its movement. So it triggered a quiet thought, and that was, is he in pain? I mentioned it to another rider standing nearby, and we watched for a moment longer, and then all of a sudden he looked relaxed. So he was still throwing his head and resisting, yet I wasn't sure. Did something look right, or was it just him going through a moment? So I let it pass and I waited for maybe 20 minutes, and then eventually I asked the instructor to get off. And when she did, we checked his body over and we realised what was going on. He was in pain, he was stiff in certain muscles, and I then led him away. So then that whole incident became, why did I let that happen in my head, and I became curious as to what was going on. And the curiosity is about why I didn't speak up sooner, why I didn't trust what I felt. And I know horses and I know King, but I questioned myself in that moment. And the thing is, I talk all the time about listening to your inner compass, about trusting your body, your knowing, your sense of alignment, about leadership that flows from truth. But practicing what you preach, it's humbling work. And I'm a human, I'm messy, and sometimes we all get it wrong. Yet, is it wrong? Is it a learning experience? And that's what I believe I've taken away from it. I've rested King over the past week, and I would like to report that he is now sound. I hopped on him last night and he was offering me everything that I was asking before. So he's much, much happier in himself. And to be honest, he'd been galloping around the paddock and it was wet and slippery. He had slipped. I'd seen him slip a couple of times in the ground, and he'd pulled a muscle. So it was something that I knew about before I hopped on him, and so there are lots of things there. Anyway, this story isn't about King. It's not just about horses. It's about the moments that we override ourselves in business, in relationships, and in life. That whisper that something isn't right. And some people call it a gut feeling, an intuition, or their inner voice. But because it doesn't shout, it is tricky. It's really subtle. And you question yourself at the time. Now, sometimes it's a quiet knowing and you go, okay, I can make changes to this. But other times you go, there's someone else involved and maybe you've promised them something or you've shared something with them and it's like, oh, do I pause? Do I stop it here? Is it the right time? Now, we know that this internal guidance system is so valuable, yet why are we so good at ignoring it? First of all, the whisper feels abstract, while logic feels concrete. We have spreadsheets, pros and cons lists, resumes. When you're about to hire someone who ticks every single box on paper, the whisper that says, I don't know, something's off, feels unprofessional and silly. So we silence it in favour of the data. Another area, which is probably where I was sitting, is the pressure to be nice. This one's huge, especially in relationships and social settings. We don't want to be difficult. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings or rock the boat. Maybe you feel like there's a small red flag and the whisper says, pay attention to that. But the desire to be polite, to give them a chance, to not seem judgmental shouts much louder. So you smile and you continue on with whatever you're doing. And the third area is the seduction of hope. We want something to work out. We want it to be the right relationship. We want our client to be the best client. We want the investment to be the winner. And our hope for that certain outcome can be so powerful, so dazzling, that it completely drowns out the quiet, that whisper that we have heard. And so we choose the story we want to be true over the feeling that is true in the moment. And when you think about it, that logical argument, the social expectation, the hopeful desire, they're all loud, compelling forces. And they're forces that we have been brought up with and we've learnt to listen to instead of that quiet whisper that is inside us. No wonder it doesn't stand a chance. And it's okay to not acknowledge it. This isn't about getting it perfect. It's about noticing, about reflecting, and choosing differently next time. But before I talk about that choice and that reflection, I just want to go back and think about, the impact of when we do ignore that whisper, that inner voice. What happens when we override it? Weeks, months, even years later, we find ourselves in a situation where we think, I knew it from the start, and yet I didn't do anything about it. It could be the business partner who seemed too good to be true. The whisper warned you about the slick answers, but your logic said it was a golden opportunity, and now you're dealing with that fallout of a partnership that was never built on true alignment. Or that client that seemed to fit all your right boxes, and yet when you work with them, you just feel drained and frustrated. And you've heard the inner whisper, but you've made other stories for yourself, and you've kept going. And so these moments aren't failures. They are lessons. They're that echo that teaches us what our own intuition sounds and feels like. The memory of I knew it is the training ground for the next time. It's acknowledging that yes, you had the answer there, and next time you're going to make a different choice. And when I spoke to my friend about what she had seen in the arena, she just reflected back on me and said, so what are you going to do next time? And I just went, whoa, bam, that was huge. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, because it really is a good reflective practice. And King was there to show me that maybe I'm not listening to my inner voice as much as I believe I am. So how do we get better at this? It's not a switch that you flip, it's a total practice. I heard someone say we're all on Amazon Prime. We're all on that. We want it now. We want it quick. If you start meditating, you want to feel that enlightenment straight away. It's not that. It is about that gentle practice of step by step and learning that your life is progressive and each step that you take is building a muscle, firing new neurons in your brain and improving what you're working on if you're living your life consciously. So the first step is simply to pause when you feel that subtle something isn't right, and then don't react or push through it, just stop. And when you take that breath, create a single moment of space between the feeling and your immediate decision, then you can acknowledge it or name it and silently or out loud say, okay, I feel a sense of unease right now and I hear that whisper. And you don't have to obey it just yet. You just have to let it know that it's been heard, which validates the feeling instead of dismissing it. And then you can become curious and you can start asking gentle questions, not what's wrong with me, but what is this feeling trying to protect me from? Or what part of this situation is causing this friction? You're not looking for a big dramatic answer, you're just listening. Maybe the whisper about the job offer isn't saying don't take the job. Maybe it's saying let's negotiate that one clause. Or maybe I need to ask another question about the team culture. And maybe with King, if I'd asked my instructor some questions and gone into the arena and asked her to pause and reflect, I wouldn't have allowed it to go on for that 20-minute period or so. So it's not about, this podcast isn't about overriding ourselves. It is part of human experience. We do it because we're hopeful, we're looking for logical solutions, and we're kind creatures trying to navigate, a world that is messy. So I'm not inviting you to dredge up regret or remorse or whatever. It's about honouring that wisdom that you gained from those moments. Honouring the time to hear those whispers and become curious about them and to be compassionate. And maybe then you'll make another choice or ask some more questions. So today I invite you to think about your own version of that moment. And when you do, when did you know but not act? What held you back at that time? And what might change if next time you trusted yourself sooner? We're all still learning. Life is messy, and sometimes the lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. I feel strongly that King was trying to help me and guide me in my life and the journey that I'm on to be my truest self. Thank you for being here with me today. And if this resonated, I'd love to hear from you, for you to share your own reflection over Instagram at I am Mirinda Smith. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining me on the Reins of Leadership. Remember to lead with presence and influence with trust. Subscribe for more insights and find resources at mirindasmith.podia.com.